Key terminology. The language used in discussions about disability and people living with disabilities can be controversial due to different interpretations and social norms. However, to advance our discussion of disability, this section briefly defines 3 key terms and perspectives that are used as a point of reference throughout the handbook. Guidelines for appropriate terminology for various impairments and types of disability are covered in the following section. Key term: impairment. Definition: a physical, intellectual, mental, or sensory characteristic or condition which places limitations on an individual's personal or social functioning in comparison with someone who does not have that characteristic or condition. In bracket, Jones and Webster, 2006, page 6. Key term: disability. Definition: an umbrella term for impairments, activity limitations, or participation restrictions which results from the interaction between the person with the condition and environmental factors, e.g., the physical environment, attitudes, and personal factors, e.g., age or gender. The common cause of disability include chronic disease, injuries, mental health problems, birth defects, malnutrition, HIV/AIDS, and other communicable diseases. In brackets, WHO 2010, page 17. Key term: inclusion. In brackets, mainstreaming. Definition: the process of assessing the implications for persons with disabilities of any planned action, including legislation, policies and programs in all areas and at all levels. Inclusion is also a strategy for making persons with disabilities, concerns and experiences an integral dimension of the design, implementation, monitoring and evaluation of policies and programs. This is so that persons with disabilities benefit equally and inequality is not perpetrated. Rather than focusing on the physical and/or psychological limitations of an individual, the emphasis should be on empowerment, access and human rights. In bracket, Albert, 2005, page 17. Words matter. The language used to refer to persons with disabilities plays a significant role in creating or maintaining negative stereotypes. For example, terms such as crippled or mentally retarded are derogatory. It is important to note that socially and personally acceptable terminology will differ between cultures or between individuals. When in doubt, simply ask politely what the person with a disability would prefer. Likewise, persons with disabilities should politely educate a person who unknowingly uses an offensive term. Mutual respect will go a long way in preventing confrontational situations. Below are suggestions of terminology to avoid when discussing disability and impairment. More appropriate alternatives are provided. Table 2. Terminology to use or avoid. Avoid: abnormal or subnormal. Negative terms that imply failure to reach perfection or normality. Appropriate: specify the disability. Avoid: afflicted with. Most people with a disability don't see themselves as afflicted. Appropriate: say the person has, in brackets, the disability. Avoid: cripple or crippled. These terms convey a negative image of a twisted, ugly body. Appropriate: say the person has a physical or mobility disability. Avoid: deaf and dumb. Inability to hear and speak does not imply an intellectual disability. Say the person has a hearing impairment. Lack of speech usually results from impaired hearing. Avoid: defective, deformed, appropriate, specify the disability, avoid, handicapped, appropriate, say person with a disability, avoid, insane, lunatic, maniac, mental patient, mentally diseased, neurotic, psycho, psychotic, unsound mind, etc. These are derogatory terms. Appropriate. Say a person with a psychiatric disability or specify the condition. Avoid. Invalid. The literal sense of the word is not valid. Appropriate. Say person with a disability. Avoid. Mentally retarded, also defective, feeble-minded, imbecile, moron, or retarded. These are offensive and inaccurate terms. Appropriate. Say, person with a mental or developmental disability. Avoid. Mongol. This is outdated and derogatory. Appropriate. Say the person has Down syndrome. Avoid. Spastic. This term usually refers to a person with cerebral palsy or who has uncontrollable spasms. This is derogatory and often used in an abusive context. Say, the person with a disability. Avoid. Special. This is an over and often inappropriately used term. For example, a special person, a special story, or a special achievement. Appropriate. Describe the person or event or achievement as you normally would. Avoid. Victim. People with a disability are not necessarily victims and prefer not to be perceived as such. Appropriate. Say, has a disability. Guidance for interacting with persons with disabilities. Although this handbook is primarily intended to address inclusivity issues in strategic planning and policy making, there are practical considerations that individuals within an organization can take to foster a respectful and accommodating environment for persons with disabilities. Below are guidelines for relating to people with various types of impairment. Table 3. General etiquette for interacting and communicating with persons with disabilities. Speak directly to the person, in the same way as you would to anyone else, not to his or her interpreter or assistant. 2. Speak normally and clearly. Don't rush your words, shout, or mumble. If you are talking to a person with limited hearing, check that the person can understand you. Get on the same eye level and look the person in the eyes, in brackets, if this is culturally appropriate. This is the best way of making sure that your attention is on the person and what he or she is saying. Don't treat an adult with disability like a child. Talk to the person like an adult. A person's impairment may prompt your concern, but don't restrict his or her freedom. Ask before you help. If you are helping someone, always do what the person asks you, not what you think is best. Don't make assumptions about people or their disabilities. Don't assume that you know what someone wants, what he or she feels, or what is best for him or her. If you have a question about what to do, how to do it, what language or terminology to use, or what assistance to offer, ask the person. Try not to stare if something about a person seems unusual to you. While many persons with disabilities are used to being looked at, staring will make anybody self-conscious and uncomfortable. Avoid language that you know is rude or derogatory. When talking about people with disabilities, refer to them by their names rather than by their impairment. Use people-first language when referring to people with disabilities. People-first language means putting the person first and the disability second. For example, say a man who is blind rather than a blind man, and a woman who uses a wheelchair instead of a wheelchair-bound woman. Use people-first language when speaking with people with disabilities and when speaking and writing about people with disabilities. Be polite. Treat the person the same way as you would anyone else. Source: The Basics. Interacting with people with disabilities. www.uiaccess.com/accessucd/interact.html. Table 4. Interacting with people with a hearing impairment. Many people with a hearing impairment rely on sign language or lip reading. Sign language, sometimes referred to as finger spelling, is a visual code for the English alphabet used to communicate with persons who have hearing impairments. Figure 1 illustrates the manual alphabet. Lip reading is a technique for understanding speech by visually interpreting the movements of the lips, face, and tongue. If you are talking to a person who is lip reading, some simple tips to remember are: get the person's attention before speaking by calling his or her name, touching his or her arm respectfully, or waving. Make sure that the person knows the topic of conversation. This is particularly important for lip reading. Many words look very similar, so people who have hearing impairments and read lips depend on context to pick out keywords. Speak slowly and clearly, but don't shout or exaggerate words, as this will make it much harder to lip read. Look directly at the person and maintain eye contact (with respect for cultural norms). Don't cover your mouth or put anything in it while talking. Stand so that your face is clearly lit, not in a shadow or in front of a bright light, as this makes it harder for the person to see your mouth. Use short sentences. Use gestures, body language, and facial expressions to help get your message across. If you aren't making yourself understood, repeat yourself once. If this doesn't work, try again using different words. If that doesn't work, write down the words for the person to read. Use open questions that require more than a yes or no answer. The response to an open question will allow you to make sure that the person with a hearing impairment has understood you. Figure 1. Alphabets and numbers in sign language. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Table 5. Interacting with people with a mobility impairment. Treat people with courtesy and respect. For example, don't leave someone behind by walking off too quickly. Just as you wouldn't lean on a person you are talking to, don't lean on someone's wheelchair or other mobility appliance. If you are offering assistance, ask before you do anything. In general, move the obstacle (whatever is in the way) rather than the person. If you are asked to carry someone, check with him or her where it is okay to hold the person (or his or her wheelchair or appliance). Always do what the person asks, not what you think is best.